Hi, and welcome to Assessment 2, Showcase and Reflection on Professional Experience. My name is Caitlin French. My student number is 9966013. My tutors are Chris and Danielle, and my session is at Monday at 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. So the school I went to was Eagle Junction State School. It was a P6 coeducation state primary school, 840 plus student attendance and growing. I did year 6, and the subject I'm focusing on for this presentation is mathematics. The class had 28 students. 2 students were ELD students. They had standard of grade 3. They had a lot of help and teacher aides visit. There were various cultures, so I had students that had lived in India previously. 2 years ago, they had moved to Australia. And then one student as English as a second language. However, this was really only evident in her spelling. All students had access to one class set of laptops and iPads between the year level, and one classroom set of mini whiteboards, which I have used in one of my strategies. So the key learning intention, I did year 6, mathematics, and angles. So the content descriptor was investigate with and without digital technologies, angles on a straight line. So the learning intention I used for the sequences was understand and label the different types of angles and how to measure them. So the goal of the unit was to complete an end of unit paper form test. Students were asked to utilize the knowledge they had obtained throughout the unit and apply it to the test. Students needed to be able to successfully apply the angle terms to the definition and apply their knowledge on how to measure angles. The test required students to use protractors, needing them to have the ability of how to use a protractor on various angles. So the diagnostic assessment was 4 questions. Questions 1, 2, and 3 I'd created just as basic angle knowledge. So this gave me an idea of how in-depth my introduction lesson had to be. And question 4 was a KWL chart. I chose this type of assessment as I knew the class included many extensive students in mathematics, with their knowledge linking to some grade 9 math techniques. This gave me an insight on how much they knew and the types of resources I could have them complete to extend their knowledge. For the diagnostic assessment, I had students complete only the K and W columns and leaving the L column for the final formative assessment. This allowed myself, their teacher, and their own self witness how far their knowledge grew on this topic. This giving them a confidence booster on how much they had achieved throughout the lessons. It also told the students who didn't know that much or still hadn't learnt a lot due to listening or just because they struggled on how much they had to catch up, leaving them to brainstorm some questions to ask. So the results on the left is student 3 work examples. So there's examples. They passed questions 1, 2, and 4. However, question 3 was they did not use the protractor properly, which is what they did. In the feedback was written, and so where might you see a right angle, just to be more specific, and great thinking. So throughout my lessons, I used students received feedback on their work during lesson time. The purpose of feedback is to allow the student to become aware of the standards certain pieces of writing are at and to identify where in the situation of their work needs improvement and identify how they could do so. Students were given multiple opportunities to clear up any confusion with certain angle concepts throughout these mathematical lessons. Throughout these lessons, students received written feedback on their worksheets, verbally during lesson time, and peer feedback during strategy 2. So I used feed forward during my verbal lessons, so my verbal feedback. So I observed students' work. I had them explain their thinking processes on how they're working out their angles, and I suggested other possible methods to complete that they could use for future angle questions. So learning experience 1, students engaged with the PowerPoint I had created. I provided students with 5 new angle terms accompanied by 5 definitions and visuals. Students copied down these angles, allowing them to revisit them if needed before the test. I drew angles on the board to match the definition, some true and some false. Students raised their hand if they agreed, and hands down were kept if they disagreed. I then got students to identify and justify their answers and allowed me to notice the students with confusion to clear any misconceptions. The strategy was a worksheet. Students matched the angle definitions to the terms. They then had to list 2 places for each angle where they would see these angles. The EALD students were only required to write 3 examples in total on the page. Feedback was written on their answer sheet. The answer sheet was given back the next lesson, and students were given time to ask questions about their feedback or to discuss with their friends on the answers they got. Learning experience 2. This was an estimation activity for students to recognize how important it is that angles are measured correctly. Students drew angles to match the sizes I'd listed on the board. They were then able to think, pair, share with a partner. They then used a protractor on an iPad to show them each angle measured correctly. The protractor app also had an instructional method on how to use a protractor. This activity incorporated ICT skills, allowed the feedback to be peer assessed, and was able to use trial and error on their whiteboards for their estimates. So this is assessment strategy 2. So the ICT skills was the iPad, which I don't have a screenshot as, but it was on Learning Place, and it's called 360 protractor. Students could type in the angle, so they typed in 40 degrees. The protractor showed them what 40 degrees look like, starting at using the ray, the vertex, starting at 0. And then they were also able to click on a link that told them in a new instructional way compared to I did. So if they struggled to how I was explaining how to use a protractor, they could also look at this and see if this was better. They also had to, in the next assessment strategy, they had to list right instructional method on how to use a protractor. So this was important that they did this. So final formative assessment. Students completed the L column on the KWL chart. They were able to identify how well they had progressed throughout the lessons and to notice where they still struggle in some areas. Students had to provide instructions on how to use the protractor, using memory from lessons and the iPad app as a skill to do this. So here's the examples of work. I have the student completed how to use a protractor with a minimum required of 3 questions, and they have given me 4. I have given feedback on a step 5, which they could have told me how to measure the angle in degrees. And then they have their L chart of what I learned in their KWL. So they told me the side of the angle is called a ray, which is part of my introduction angle, a lesson, which is great. The bottom of the protractor goes on the ray, which is also from my introduction lessons. A reflex angle is between 180 to 360 degrees. All of these, what I had learned, suggestions in this student's work, tells me that a lot of visuals were assisted in these lessons, so help the kids know what 180 degrees and 360 looks like and what a ray is. So I believe the visuals I had used in my lessons had helped. So the data comparison, the data difference was 17 mistakes on the diagnostic test and only 7 mistakes on the final. The EALD students all improved, however, still getting some answers wrong, either 2 or just 1 answer wrong. Some students were just unable to read the question properly, and some struggled to apply the knowledge they knew for the question. So throughout my prac, it was 4 weeks and I taught a lot of maths. It was very rewarding. I had a great time. I struggled with one goal I had was to implement extensive challenging activities for the extended students. As I told you before, they were grade 9. So applying new strategies for them not to just sit there whilst the others completed their work as they had already completed. And behaviour was a better improvement. I had to teach more than 1 grade 6 class as a teacher, swap around some lessons. So that was great also to see how well other teachers taught too and how other students responded to me. Thank you.